Okay, let's back up a bit. So when I went to step 15, all of a sudden I realized why this was such a big instruction. You can see that this is an M-05M, and that's how you would have the placement of these parts. That's an M-05S. That's how you would put those pieces in. And then I discovered on the next page, if you have, let's see, where is it? This is for the M-05L, and that's how you would have the placement of these parts if you have an M-05L. So what is that? So what you've got is a long wheelbase, a medium wheelbase, and a short wheelbase. And it even explains right here what pages you should be referring to depending upon which chassis you're building. Well, I'm looking at this instruction manual going, well, I don't know if the Yaris is a L, short, or medium. However, I happen to go back to the box. There it is, the car. And what do I find on the front? M-05L. So you're building the Yaris with the long wheelbase. So we can go back to here. We skip these instructions. We skip this instruction. We go right over here. We skip this, and we go right into step 15 for the M-05L. And if it's the long wheelbase, you just continue along 16, 17, 18. So just know that the Yaris is on the long wheelbase chassis. So I've pulled together a few of the parts here. I'll go ahead and get the screws ready that we need, and then we will attach these parts to the chassis. Okay, so we're going to build this part first. So they talk about noting direction, and you can see that you should see the two holes there, which are right there, which means this is the side that we need. And this, you can see the ridged hole on this end, so we know that that is going to go on that side. But we've got to put in the step screw, this guy right here. Put that in. That's then going to screw into that part there. So I'll just screw a bit of that in. Just enough. And then on this side, same idea. We're going to grab the notch on that side, grab the other screw, and that's going to go in there. So screw that into there, and then I'm just going to tighten those down. So there is the finished pieces. I've got those on. They're nice and loose. I haven't tightened, or I should say I haven't over tightened them. So that is done for now. We're going to now put on this plate, which goes onto the backside of the chassis. So if I flip this over, you can see that this is going to sit right here. And we need to put in the 4 smaller tapping screws. So I'm just going to screw this in, and we'll go on to the next piece. Okay, so that part is now screwed into the bottom, which you can kind of tell that's going to be attaching the rear arms for the rear tires and suspension. So we're going to put this piece in, and as you can also tell, the way they're telling you, because this is the long wheelbase, this has to now fit onto the chassis on the back side. So that's going to fit at the far end of the chassis when you attach it. So I'm just going to put in the three screws that go into the 2 holes here and 1 in the back. And then we'll be done with this step, and we can move on to step 16. Okay, so that part is now complete. You can see the arms are now attached to the top of the chassis as intended. So we can now move on to step 16, which is putting together the rear arms and attaching the rear shocks. Okay, so we've got all the parts ready to go. We've got the shocks, and I think we'll build this first. And you can see they're talking about the direction, and you can see the little notches on the plastic. Same with that side, so you know that those two are going to fit in together just like that. And you can see that you're going to use the little tapping screws, so there's two on either side. So we're going to screw these guys in. And as I've said before with this is a softer plastic. The C tree is a softer plastic. So just be more careful that when you're doing the tapping, using the tapping screw, don't over tighten. Once it gets to the end and you can feel that it's grabbed the end, don't keep twisting, because all you'll end up doing is stripping it out, because the softer plastic can't handle it. Yeah. So I'm getting to the end and then just doing an extra little twist. So that one is done. And you know, we can see that the same thing applies to the other end. You want the notches on that side, and then the notches on that one there. So if we take make sure that notch is right, make sure the notch is on that side, and put it together. Same idea. We'll get these in. And just screw until you feel it grabbing. I just don't want to over tighten when it's going into softer plastic. There we go. You feel it grab. I give it an extra little twist. And that's all I want. So there are the two arms. So now we're going to attach this brace, which you can see is attached to, if we take this end, where is it? Yeah, this end here, you can see that the shock, the bottom of the shock is going to go into this piece, and the top part of the shock is going into that brace. So we'll just do that. In fact, I'll grab one of them right here, and we can see that now we're using the step screws. So I'll take one of these, and we go into the, you can see we're going into the that one right there. And again, even this is going into the softer plastic. So watch where that step screw is, where it's going to come to the end, and just don't keep tightening. You can sort of see it there. I'm very, very close. I'm going to feel a bit of resistance, but that's as far as I'm going. So now that's on there. So I'll do the same with the other one, and I'll move on to the next little bit. So once you've attached the bottom part of the shock to the arm, you then put a step screw into the top part, which you can see, which I'll do the same here with the other one, so that you then have the parts are going to look like that essentially. And then we're going to be able to, on the next step, attach this to the chassis. So I'll finish this off, and then we can move on to step 17. So when you've finished step 16, technically that's what it's going to look like. And then what we'll do now is move on to 17 and actually attach these parts to the chassis. So you can see that these screws are going to go through the part we put on earlier and then into the shock brace on that side. And then these two, you're showing that you want them flipped down before you install this. So we'll go ahead and do that now. And those, there's what, 2 of the longer tapping screws that we need for step 17. So I have those. So I'll just go ahead and put those on so we can move on. So for ease of attachment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole thing and pretty much put it in place as it would be sitting on the chassis. And that way, all I need to do is push this down into place when you put the tapping screw in, because the tapping screw goes into the bottom hole and then gets attached to the bottom hole that you see down there. So I just have to push this down and screw it in, so you've got a nice firm base to actually have a bit of leverage. So I'm just going to put those screws in, and then we can move on to the next step. So the 2 screws are in, so now the top part of the shock towers are in place. So we can move on to step 18, which is attaching the rear axles. So I need to grab the rear axle pieces here, and then we'll be able to finish this off. I've already got the screws, so I'll just grab the other pieces and we'll put this together. Okay, so as you can see, there's a longer screw for the bottom arm and the smaller screw for the smaller end of the arm. So we'll put the big screw in and have it all the way through. And again, it's a softer plastic, but we're just going to screw this in all the way. And again, once you feel some resistance, just don't go too far. Okay, and then we're going to take the smaller screw, which you can see is also going to go through the rear wheel hub. So we're going to stick that in there, slide this through, making sure it goes all the way through nicely. It does. And then we'll screw this in. Same thing, don't go too crazy with tightening this, just make sure it's definitely tight, but we're going into that softer plastic. And then this one is a step screw that goes through this part and into the hub again. And this one again, this one's going into the harder plastic, so I might give it a little bit more of a tightening, but once the step screw is got to the point where there's some resistance, I'll stop. There we go. So there you have it. The rear suspension is now fully in place and the arms are on. I did go ahead and do the other side, so you can see now how this is going to operate. So that means we are done with the rear axles, and we're now going to be moving on to working with the radio gear, getting it all set up so that we can install the servo and the arms for the steering.